everyone, welcome to today's edition of the Wedding Planning Summit. We are really happy to have with us here Chris Milliken, who is the founder and owner of Peng Wines. And not to also mention, he's the author of this book called White or Red, It's All in Your Head. It's a really awesome book for any one of us who wants to pick up and know more about wines. So Chris, can you tell us more about Peng Wines?
So Peng Wine is a company that I started in Chile 12 years ago. And I had a vision of making boutique wines that I could bring direct to the customer. And in the Maipo Valley of Chile, it's renowned for making traditional red wines. And so I had a partner in Chile. He's an amazing guy. And we decided that Peng Wine was a fun way to get people to remember our brand because each wine is named after a different penguin.
Penguin.
And penguins mate for life. So it's another reason that we make a perfect wedding wine as well.
Oh, makes a lot of sense. Oh, that's why for the wines I can see the logo, there is the penguin.
Correct.
I see. I understand that you used to be a private chef as well.
That is correct. I traveled around the United States, South America, and in Australia, and I did a lot of private chefing. And I loved it because I could cook and create whatever I wanted to. And usually I had free reign to go out and buy whatever it was that was fresh or in the marketplace. And so I get to apply that when I'm making my wines as well, because I take my culinary background and think about when I'm making a wine, how is that wine going to go with food?
Okay, speaking about wine with food, I think that's something that's on the top of everyone's list, right? When they are looking to pair like wedding wines with the food, be it like a Western sit-down or maybe a Chinese 10-course dinner, right? Mm-hmm. Could you give us an idea in terms of how should couples pick their wines and how should they be matching with the food?
I think the most important thing is that the couple picks a wine that they like because they like the wine. Mm-hmm. The worst thing for people to do is to take all of their friends and family and say, let's all get together and pick a wine.
Like a public voting.
Exactly. I have found that if you bring in 12 people for a wine tasting, you get 12 different opinions.
And that sounds like a recipe for disaster.
Exactly. The family feud starts before the wedding even happens. So I think the most important thing is that the bride and groom sit down together and it's just the bride and groom deciding on what style of wine that they want to have. And then secondly, then they start to take into consideration what is the menu, how many courses is the menu, and most importantly, even before that, how is the wine going to be served? Because how a wine is going to be served may dictate your budget in a great way. If you just have an open bar and people can drink wine all night long, or are people going to put the bottle of wine on the table, or is the wine going to be served a different wine with each course? And so those are definitely some things to consider. If you're going to do a wine with each course, then you want to sit down with the chef and actually try each one of those courses with the different wines that are in the potential. But generally, those types of weddings are really hard to manage unless it's very small. If you are talking about a 400-guest wedding, you're talking a lot of management and manpower to make sure that everybody has the right wine with the right dish.
Right. Wow. Sounds like a lot of things to manage. It's not just like serving wine, right?
Exactly. It's more than just grape juice. It's also a matter of if you have 5 courses or 4 courses, then you're looking at all that glassware as well. So you're talking all the management that the restaurant has to be prepared for, and making sure you have the right glasses for each type of wine.
I see. So say for a sit-down course, Western, right? Maybe 4 or 5 courses. So how many types of wines should?
The safest way to go is just choose 1 red and 1 white. That's probably the easiest way to go. You need a crowd pleaser, and most of the people that come to a wedding, are more just looking for the white or red option. Once you start giving choices, it starts to get also very confusing. Mostly confusing for the waitstaff, because the waitstaff has to keep up with what people are drinking. The other option would be to have a white, a red, and a sparkling wine.
Wow, sounds great though, as a guest.
Absolutely. And sparkling wines are also used for the toast quite often as well.
And champagne?
Exactly. So champagne is sparkling wine. Sparkling wine is champagne. Champagne is sparkling wine from the region of Champagne. Anything produced outside of there has a different name to it. So it could be sparkling wine, bubbly, prosecco. Could be a different style of wine. Ultimately, when people are raising their glass, it's about the moment, probably more so than it is about the bubbly that's in the glass.
Great. So what about traditional Chinese dinners, right, where they start off with maybe a mixed platter and then they move to a soup and maybe after that like meat and chicken and veg?
I think that you want to start off with a white wine, just because red wines start to feel a little bit heavier in the mouth. And usually when you start off eating Chinese meals, you start off with the lighter flavors first before you get into the bigger and heavier flavors.
Right.
And with a white wine, you want to keep it rather crisp and young. I would stay away from Sauvignon Blancs that are too highly acidic, maybe something like a Pinot Grigio or even a light Chardonnay that can balance across more different types of cuisine. And though if you're just having somebody come in for a reception, then you might go with a Sauvignon Blanc or something more crisp. But if you, again, budget-wise, it's usually easier to stay with just one or two wines because you're buying in more volume.
I see. So when we talk about like ordering wines for the weddings, how long before the wedding should someone start to look into buying?
I would say at least a month. Because if you get too close and the supplier, depending on the size of your wedding, doesn't have those wines that you've picked out, you want to make sure that the supplier set those aside for you and that they're ready to go. Right. And you want to also ensure that the wines are at the venue 48 hours before the wedding.
Oh, why is that so?
Two reasons. One, the last thing you want to be worrying about on your wedding day. And you want to have time for the restaurant to receive and properly chill the wines and properly decant the wines and be prepared for uncorking, etc. So you need to have plenty of time. You do not want the wines showing up an hour before the wedding and they show up at the wrong temperature or they show up and there's problems with the count, things like that.
Wow, I think these are probably things that many people don't know.
Absolutely. There's a lot of behind the scenes.
Yeah, what about in terms of gauging the amount of wine that I should be ordering? Say if I have a wedding of, say, 200 people,
Sure.
So how should I gauge?
So there's many more factors that come into this as well. Though it seems like it should be a formula that goes perfectly with this. It would depend on what time of day is the wedding, what day of the week is the wedding. Does the wedding, is there a food pairing that goes, or a food and wine pairing that's going with the wine? So you have all these different angles. Factors. If it's a Friday night or a Saturday night.
Okay, say it's a Saturday night dinner and there's no particular pairing.
Okay.
You just red and white.
Is it just a dinner or is there dancing and a little bit of festivities going on afterwards?
Good point. Let's say no dancing.
Okay,
just
no dancing.
Yeah.
Just having dinner. Then you probably want to account for at least 3 glasses of wine per person. Now, if you're buying the wine separate from an event, you can probably work out a situation where you only pay for the wines that you use. And any wines that you don't use can be collected and therefore you don't have to pay for those up front. But that becomes part of the negotiation between the bride and groom and perhaps the wedding planner or the facility where the wedding is being held or the distributor or wholesaler.
I see. For some venues, they actually offer like beer as well, and beer and wine, right? So how does it really mix?
So when they do offer beer, you'd have to depend on your crowd. So if you're very traditional and everybody that's coming is of Chinese descent and you're looking at probably just a little bit of white wine, more red wine, and some beer. And so I would say about 60-40 or 70-30, more red to white. And if you have beer involved, then that probably takes about 20% away from your wine consumption.
I see.
With weddings, it's a little bit different than if you're just going to a party. With weddings, people are more kind to say, okay, I'll do wine, unless you're offering whiskey. So now you have another whole thing that you're adding there.
Okay.
And if you're adding whiskey, then you really need to know, does Uncle so-and-so drink a bottle of whiskey every night? Make sure he's got his favorite bottle right there.
Wow. There's a lot of thought process that comes behind.
Absolutely.
Right? Wow. Okay, so when a couple is looking at wedding wines, what should they already be decided, before they come to you, right?
Exactly. It's good to know the numbers. They should definitely know how many people will be attending the wedding. The date should already be set, so you're going to know if you're looking at a weekend or a weekday.
Chris, so how do we budget for wine?
So I would probably recommend that for a wine that is reasonably priced and more of a crowd pleaser, that you would probably want to spend around $20 to $30 a bottle. For a bottle of wine. Now, of course, if you're really into wine and you know that everybody coming is really into wine as well, you definitely want to push it up a little bit. Here in Singapore, because of the way the tax structure works, the more you spend on a bottle of wine, the higher the quality goes up quite quickly, generally speaking. And here in Singapore as well, there's a really good sommelier association that does a good job of regulating the value versus
the
price for wines.
I see.
So you can rest assured that if you're going to spend $30 for a bottle of wine, you are getting definitely better than you would for a $20 bottle of wine. And I think that again, coming back to, you want the consignment, you definitely want the consignment, but you need to understand that when you open a bottle, it's sold.
Right.
A number of times I've done events and I've had people come back and say, well, you said that if anything that we returned, you would take back. And maybe they bought 36 bottles, but 12 of them came back open. And they just put the cork back in and said, see, we never drank this. What to do?
But it could have been kept at the wrong temperature.
Could have been kept at the wrong temperature, and the cork is already out of it, so how would I possibly be able to do anything else with the product?
Thumb, as long as the cork is out, it's done.
Exactly, absolutely. And that goes for screw caps too, because I've also seen, we don't have any of our wines in screw caps at the moment, but for screw caps they think, well, if I just put the cap back on it, I can give it back. But any importer distributor will definitely be checking to make sure that when the wine comes back, it was not open previously. So then, a number of times that's happened.
So in that case, what should people do to reduce the number of like half-open bottles?
If you have the style where you're putting a bottle on each table, you certainly want to, if you have your initial bottles out there, before you start opening other bottles, it would be highly advisable to go around and ask the waiters to make sure that anybody who's not drinking, perhaps maybe there's 3 or 4 tables that are not consuming any alcohol, that those bottles get transferred over to the tables who are drinking. If the waiters are not advised of that, they will just keep bringing out new bottles, and the bottles that were open for the tables where people weren't drinking, they just go to waste, unfortunately.
Wow.
And it's also important to advise the bartenders not to just open everything before the wedding starts, because sometimes they get very excited, they see all the people coming in, and they look at what they have, and they just start opening so that they're all prepared. And then people come in, and maybe only 10% of the people end up drinking wine, and they have all this wine open and ready to go.
Wow.
So. And another thing that you may find that if the label is completely damaged, the
like if they soak it in
distributor,
water,
exactly.
Right?
So they've had it in ice buckets, or they've had it chilled, and then they try to take it back to the wholesaler. They're not going to go for that one either. So it's also important that you're chilling more or less what you think you're going to need.
Right.
And then as for our weddings that you had mentioned, if you have, for example, if you have an outdoor wedding.
Yeah, outdoor wedding.
You want to make sure that the red wines are chilled as well as the white wines. Because if you're an outdoor wedding here in Singapore, that is going to be at a high temperature very, very quickly. So with wine, the reason that we chill wine is actually to keep from the alcohol vapors from burning our noses. And so if the wine is very warm, like if it's in Singapore and you're outside, you're going to get the alcohol vapors to your nose and you're going to get a burning sensation. And then people say, oh, that wine's not very smooth. And it's actually because the wine was too warm. So chilling the wine is definitely a good idea, knowing that the wine's going to get warm quite quickly.
Right. So in indoor conditions, we don't really have to chill the red wine.
Okay, there's another one for you. In Singapore again, so traditionally people say, well, red wine should be served at room temperature.
Yep.
Well, room temperature is about 5 degrees colder than a room in Singapore with the aircon on. So you still want to chill your red wines just a little bit here in Singapore, just to take
What's the
a little
ideal
bit
temperature?
The ideal temperature would be right around 17 to 18 degrees would be ideal.
For red wine?
For red wine.
For white wine?
Maybe anywhere between 13 to 16 degrees.
That's pretty precise.
Well, then again, you have people who have different opinions about how they wish to enjoy the wine. Partially why I wrote the book the way that I did is so that people can realize it's really about you. And if you have a couple coming together for a wedding, it's about them. And they're choosing the wine. If they're choosing the wine to make a lasting impression and they really want their guests to remember the experience,